the Liberty Podcast with Clint Armitage. We are proclaiming liberty one show at a time, and the next one starts right now. Welcome back. Clint Armitage with the Liberty Podcast and the RadioCoffeehouse.com. So, our episode today is entitled, Be Strong and Courageous. And the reason why it's entitled that is we're going to be reading from the book of Joshua, chapter 1, verses 1 through 9. And then we're going to get into leadership. We're going to get into talking about being strong and courageous and how God had to say that and help Joshua do that same exact thing. And that's because there were some big shoes to fill. We'll talk about it in just a second. First, let's read Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 through 9. Now it came about after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, that the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' servant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. So now arise, cross this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them, the sons of Israel. Every place on which the sole of your foot steps, I have given it to you, just as I spoke to Moses. From the wilderness, and this is Lebanon, even as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, as far as the great sea, toward the setting of the sun, will be your territory. No one will be able to oppose you all the days of your life. Just as I have been with Moses, I will be with you. I will not desert you nor abandon you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall give this people possession of the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and courageous. Be careful to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, so that you may achieve success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your lips, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will achieve success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified nor dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Okay. So that was Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 through 9. And as you can see, a little bit of background, Moses has just recently passed away. Now God is giving the mantle, the charge to Joshua to take all the Israelites, and I believe the amount was about 2 million of them, into the promised land, into Canaan. Now, Joshua knows that there's going to be a lot of battles, so he is a little bit apprehensive here, okay? And in Joshua 1:9, it actually happens 3 different times within those 9 verses. God tells him to be strong and courageous. But verse 1:9 reads again, Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. So the reason why the Lord has to say this multiple times to Joshua during those 9 verses is because you can see, from the reading that it's a full-on pep talk. And God is telling Joshua in those verses to be strong and courageous because Joshua is a little bit scared, a little bit apprehensive about the mission that he's being sent on by God. Joshua's being instructed to lead, like I said, about 2 million Israelites into the promised land. And it's a huge task, right? And he knows that it's going to be difficult. He knows there's going to be problems. He knows there's going to be conflicts and multiple battles, like full-on wars. But again, I think the biggest factor for Joshua and the biggest fear factor for him is that he knows he has to fill the shoes of Moses. Right? Now, Moses led the people for years through the wilderness, and God used Moses to do some awesome, miraculous signs throughout, even before they left Egypt. Actually, God used Moses to lead them out of Egypt with all these miracles. And I remember the 10 plagues and everything that Moses did with the staff and the snake and how he spoke to Pharaoh and how the Red Sea parted. All that stuff happened under Moses' watch while Moses was in charge, was the leader. And the Bible also says, quote, no one has ever shown the mighty power or performed the awesome deeds that Moses did in the sight of Israel, unquote. And so when you hear that, you're like, okay, how is Joshua going to fulfill those shoes? Like Moses is the man. Even to this day, Israel regards Moses as one of the top prophets, top leaders, and respected Israelites ever. It's because of all the things that God did through him. The Bible also says he was the meekest man on earth. So there was a lot of things that Moses was and did that God brought to him. And so Joshua is feeling a little bit apprehensive because he feels he has to fill those shoes. And so how do you follow that? So we can start to see why Joshua needs a little bit of a pep talk, right, from God. And God's the only one that can really give him that pep talk because, again, he was just under Moses. He was Moses' assistant. And this is a huge undertaking that God needs Joshua to do right now at this time. And just like Joshua, sometimes we'll get assigned, or have to take over and lead during some weary times or some uncertain times. It could be that we're being told to lead a pretty important project, or now you're being put in charge of a team and this team is expected to perform at high levels. Whatever the case, sometimes there are just super high expectations placed upon us, and the outcome is really, really dependent on our leadership performance, on how we perform as leaders. And so it can get scary. We can get apprehensive sometimes, right? Because it's something we haven't experienced, especially in this case here with Joshua. Over 2 million Israelites. But, either way, we have to remember that God either already provided or he will provide what we need in order to complete this mission that he is sending you on. Because he won't send you on a mission he's not going to provide for, right? And now there's a pastor, his name is David Jeremiah, and he says this in one of his sermons. He says, quote, "God's commandments is God's enablements." Basically, what that means is God will enable you to do whatever he's commanded you to do. So there's no real need to be fearful, of failure or embarrassment or anything like that, because if God has put you on this mission and assigned you this task or this leadership position, or the circumstances that you're given has forced you into a situation and you're in God's will, then no matter the outcome, God's going to make sure things get done the way he wants it done. All you have to do is obey, because that's what Joshua had forgotten this, even though he was a part of a lot of miracles, a lot of stuff that he saw under Moses, that God did through Moses. I think Joshua may have forgotten that God had already prepared him for this mission, just like he's already prepared you. Joshua had been Moses' assistant while Moses led all these people, especially through some hard times, right? The journey through the wilderness. I mean, they were eating manna. And it was 40 years of this. And there was complaining and there was bickering and there was fighting and undermining. And all this stuff happened under Moses' watch. So Joshua was under Moses' direct tutelage during this time, during all the miracles, during the signs, during the wonders, and the battles that the Israelites faced. So he had the training and he had the experience to lead these people. He just needed some encouragement and guidance. And that's what God gave him. He gave him that. He gave him encouragement. He gave him guidance. In those few verses, those 9 verses, he said, "Be strong and courageous," 3 different times. And why did he say this? Because he knew that he was going to be with Joshua till the end and through this time of leadership and struggle and fear and apprehension. Not only that, God was also instructing Joshua to lead the Israelites to the promised land by going across the Jordan River during harvest season in the fall time. So back in biblical times, back then, when it was harvest season, the banks of the Jordan River would actually overflow. And I'm not talking just a little bit. It wasn't a little bit of water. It was a lot. It was, like a full-on flood. The Jordan River would actually widen, and it'd also get deeper because of the flood season. So it was pretty dangerous. They also had a strong current. The Jordan had a strong current through this time, and that's what also made it dangerous. So crossing with animals and children, all of it was pretty dangerous during this time of year, every year back in those days. It's not so much in these days, but back then it used to overflow and really be dangerous crossing that Jordan River at that time of year. And to add to that, God had also instructed Joshua to have the priests go first with the Ark of the Covenant. Now think about this. The priests that were carrying this heavy ark had to be the first to cross this dangerous water. They were the ones instructed to go first. They had to go across this dangerous river. The ark represented God's presence. And so what the Lord wanted the Israelites to do was follow behind his presence. He even told them to stay back. They had to stay a certain distance. They couldn't get too close. But either way, he wanted them to follow behind his presence, which was represented by the ark. And so when the priests stepped into the water, because they had to actually act first before a miracle could happen, they stepped into the water and the river stopped flowing and made a dry walkway for the people to pass through and get to the other side safely. So let's see how this can apply to you. God may be telling you right now that you're going to have to be a leader, that you're going to have to follow a path that may seem impossible, okay? Just like the Israelites, when they're looking at this Jordan River during flood season, you're like, this is impossible. How are we going to do this? But that's how God wants you to see things for now, because he's going to want you to follow this path, and it may seem impossible right now. But the other thing is, though, is that he is out in front of you, just like he was with the ark. His presence was in front of the Israelites, and all they had to do is follow him. So all you have to do is follow him. And then when you step out in faith, just like they did, that's when God's going to provide the path that wasn't really visible before. Like you couldn't see the path before until you stepped out in faith the way that God is telling you so to do. And then you're going to be able to see the path that he's provided. It's not going to be visible until you step out in faith. So the bottom line is, if God's instructing you to take the reins, and if you're feeling some anxiety, listen to his still small voice because he's directing you. Remember, he's reminding you that you already have the training and the experience to complete this mission successfully and be the leader he wants you to be. So don't worry. He's going to be with you the whole time, just like he was with the Israelites the whole time. So be strong and courageous. All right, that's it for this episode. This is part 1 of Be Strong and Courageous. Until next time, my name is Clint Armitage. This is the Liberty Podcast. Stay safe, stay motivated, and keep seeking liberty. Joining us for another episode of the Liberty Podcast with Clint Armitage. If you want to get in touch, email us at info@clintarmitage.com.